When did you join 100 Black Men, and what roles have you served in?
That's I joined 100 Black Men in 1999. Um, after it took me a while to join, actually. I knew all of the guys that many of the guys that are the founding members. I knew them. The founding president, James Waller, was my dorm advisor my first year at UVA, and many of the founding members are were his chapter brothers. They were all Kappas from UVA. And then one of my fraternity brothers, Bill Highsmith, was one of the founding members. And Godfrey Maynard, who I knew. Um, all of them, we had interacted in different spaces, but I knew of them or knew them. Um, so when I first was invited to take a look at it, I didn't join immediately. Um, I thought about it a little while. I was busy. I was working. I was working for Network Associates at the time. So, um, in fact, I was working for Trusted Information Systems at the time when I think I was first exposed, and we were being acquired by Network Associates. So I was busy.
Mhm.
But in 99, I joined. Um, and I came in, and John Peoples and Dez and Barry Hudson, all of them were in. Um, and I got involved, got to work, and we were a small chapter at that time. And the guys were trying to still find their way. And then soon after I got in, Barry became president. And Barry was a great visionary president. He had a vision of what he wanted to do. Um, and so I got involved and stayed with them. But then, as I mentioned, I was working for Network Associates corporate, and I was traveling a lot. Wasn't around a lot. And then I got married, and during the time I was getting married, I think this was, but I did in '99. As soon as I got involved, I took their advice and went to a national convention. And when I went to the first national convention, I was blown away because now I went from a perspective of seeing a small chapter in Washington, D.C., to understanding this larger organization with all this international uh, influence and notoriety. And I mean, I remember going to my first national conference that was in Orlando. Willie Garrett was walking around, Johnny Cochran was there, Tabitha Smiley, Cornell West. Um, and I'm gonna share this with you. I was sitting in a session, and Fred Humphreys, the president of FAMU, I remember that I was blown away about what he had to say. He was like, because there was a discussion about trying to get young African Americans into college, and the challenge of not having the money, and da da da. And Fred Humphreys, who was the president of Florida A&M at the time, stood up and said, if y'all have young men in your cities, in your chapter, that want to go to college, don't have the money, send them to FAMU. We'll find the money.
Mm. Mm.
And I was like blown away that I was in a room with this many successful Black men. And that's what I'm saying. I turned and I was talking to, uh, when that statement was said, I was talking to the person next to me. It was an older gentleman. And I looked, and he said something back to me, and I can't remember. It was like, yeah, we were talking about something that occurred in the session. And I picked my head up from my notes that I was taking and looked. It was Earl Woods. It was Tiger Woods' dad
Mm.
sitting right
Wow.
next to me. I was like blown away. right? Blown away. Now I didn't really, but that was my experience at the first conference, walking around with all these folks around. It's like, you know, uh, and I was like, okay, I got to stay involved this or this. So um, then later, Barry asked me to be his vice president of operations. And we were off the rolling at that point. We were freaking frack. I was the taskmaster and he was the strategic thing. We built a strategic plan, and my job was to make sure that I held folks accountable and got things done. And then once we start executing, and then the way I operate, then we were in a position that I was then able to start raising some money. And I took things that Barry had put in place and just made them bigger. And then Barry got involved on the national board, and I saw how that worked. And then I ran. Ironically, even though they say they don't like to have multiple people from the same city or state or chapter on the national board,
Mm-hmm.
with the exception of Atlanta.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, Atlanta, they're gonna have 10 people on the national executive committee, and nobody complains about that. Um, but so they used that against Barry. Barry ended up losing. I had enough support, and I ended up winning. Um, and then I went from member at large, did 2 terms there, to then doing vice chair of development, and from there to vice chair, when we went from 4 vice chairs of development programs, finance, and operations to just one. We rolled all that into one vice chair. And I served in that role for a term as well. And so I've been involved since 99. Um, really enjoyed the work that we've done and the lives that we've impacted.